Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. We are welcoming you to today's session of the annual Forum 2026 of the Scaling Community Practice. My name is Johannes Lin, and I serve as the co-chair of the Scaling Community of Practice. Now, before we begin today's session, let me give you a little background on who we are as a community. We were founded about 11 years ago, and we have grown from about 20 members initially to over 5,000 members now. And everybody is free to join. So if you're not already a member, please go on our website, which you'll find in the chat, and do join us at the earliest opportunity. We are a network of development and climate practitioners and experts, and our purpose is to contribute to the scaling agenda. That means helping to achieve sustainable impact that matches the scale of the problem. The scaling community has 9 working groups, of which the agriculture, rural development, and social enterprise working group is one. The community, we publish reports on the scaling experience of our members, including in regular newsletters to which you are invited to contribute. We produce our own knowledge products, which you can find on our website, on the chat. And we organize these annual forum events to exchange scaling knowledge and promote action. Now, in this year's 2-week forum, we mark a significant milestone because we are introducing and launching what we call the Scaling Campaign 2026-2030. Now, the Scaling Campaign is intended to be a collective effort to strengthen the systems, standards, and partnerships that are needed to make transformational scaling the norm across development and climate ecosystems. In the working group sessions, we're reflecting on how scaling works in each of the working group areas, thematic areas, and sectors, and how you all can contribute to the goals of the Scaling Campaign. At tomorrow's last session, we will summarize the main takeaways from the entire forum, the 10 sessions that preceded tomorrow's session, and we'll issue a call for action to support the scaling community practice. Please join us tomorrow for what is, for us, a very important closing session of the forum. During the event today, you can use the chat function to let us know where you're calling from, and also to share any comments, questions, or reflections in the discussion live. The sessions are being recorded. We hope that you share the sessions once we load them on our website with your Francophone and Spanish-speaking colleagues, because in the recordings, you can also have the sessions in translation in French and Spanish. So let's now turn to the session of today. And it's my great pleasure to introduce, for the first time, I'm happy to say, the co-chairs of the Agricultural Development and Social Enterprise Working Group, who have recently assumed their role as co-chairs. We have Esther Quijoro, who is a researcher at CGIAR and a recognized researcher and scaling practitioner with over 15 years of experience in agriculture, gender, climate change, and rural development. Her work focuses on translating research into impact by strengthening systems, partnerships, and capacities for scaling innovations across agri-food systems in the global south. The second co-chair is Mukei Muchimuti. She is a global development professional with extensive experience in program design, strategic planning, and high-stakes internal communications, both within the US and across sub-Saharan Africa. She currently serves as the Resilience Partnership Manager at One Acre Fund in Washington, D.C. And third, we have Dr. Anamika Priyardashini, who is a political economist who specialized in gender and development and was recently appointed Associate Professor of Legal Practice at Jindal Global Law School of the OP Jindal Global University. She asked me to make sure that you know that she's teaching economics and not law. She previously served as Director of Knowledge Management, Research Design, and Passing Gifts at Haifa International. So in conclusion for my introduction, let me thank the outgoing chairs, Julie Howard, Mark Huizinga, Frank Place, and Leonard Waltering. They did a wonderful job over the last, 5-6 years in managing a very active agricultural development and social enterprise working group. Thank you, and it's now my pleasure to hand over to Anamika. Anamika, over to you to tell us what we are talking about today.
Thank you so much, Johannes. So now we are about to begin our session. And as you know, this session is hosted by the Working Group on Agriculture and Rural Development and Social Enterprise, which is a part of Scaling Community of Practices. And this group, I will briefly share about this group. This group brings together professionals from various streams like development organizations, donor agencies, foundations, and research institutions. And we are here because we are interested in scaling innovations and that improve food security and rural livelihoods. Our group is basically focusing on areas such as designing interventions for scale, applying scaling frameworks, learning from practices, responsible scaling, and system thinking. It is a voluntary network where practitioners share real-world experiences and learn from each other through regular exchange and meetings. And I'm also glad to share that we are preparing to launch an important campaign in 2026 aimed at mainstreaming scaling into the institutional DNA of development and climate organization. Now, coming to today's session, this session aims at positioning scaling as a critical lens for engaging with contemporary global context, where the demand for impact often exceeds available resources. We know scaling is complex and no single organization can cover all scaling challenges. For sure, there is need for plural approaches, but also preparedness and willingness of working together, coming together and joining hands. So in today's, by foregrounding, we are trying to, foreground blended approach. And by doing that, today's session is attempting to bring together technical rigor and social capital, formal system and informal institution, as well as evidence-driven framework and contextual responsiveness. And we believe this framing invites reflection on how scaling process can remain inclusive, resilient, and ethically grounded rather than exclusively focused on expansion only. And while doing so, our session will attempt to underscore why rethinking scaling is central to designing intervention that are both transformative and sustainable in the contemporary world, which is marked by overlapping economic, ecological, social, and political disruptions. And we all know that we are living in an era of polycrisis. So maybe we need really a very comprehensive approach. I'm glad to share that we are really honored to share that we have Anne Vaughan with us today as the first speaker of today's session. Anne is the Associate Vice President for Resilient Futures at CARE. In this role, she works on advancing partnerships and programs that support CARE's global efforts to strengthen climate resilience. Her work contributes to CARE's goal of helping 25 million people become more resilient to climate change, while also expanding access to climate finance that supports women, girls, boys, and men in vulnerable communities. Before joining CARE, Anne served as Deputy Assistant Administrator in the Bureau of Resilience, Environment, and Food Security at the United States Agency for International Development. In this position, she helped oversee Feed the Future, the US government's flagship global food security initiative. Between 2021 and 2023, Anne also played a key role in creating and leading the President's Emergency Plan for Adaptation and Resilience, or PREPARE, a whole of government initiative aimed at helping 500 million people around the world and help them to cope with the impacts of climate change. We are delighted to have you here with us today, Anne. The floor is yours. Over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. And CARE's a real proud member of the Scaling Community of Practice. And I think about 2 years ago, had the pleasure of working on a case study with the community of practice that outlined and dug into our history of how we've scaled over the years and some really good lessons learned. So we'll share a little bit of that, So yeah, excited to be here, and with such a good group of people that are focusing on how do we scale the good things that we need to in development, especially in such a new and different environment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about CARE's work and importance of women and girls, our approach to scaling, and then spend the majority of my time speaking about social enterprises and then how we can scale social enterprises and some of the challenges that we're facing. Because I think one of the purposes of our conversation today is to think about partnerships and who we need to work with to get the impact that we want and scale with communities, businesses, and government, so we can have a real lasting impact. And I would also encourage folks throughout the webinar, if you could drop questions in the chat, but we'll have plenty of time for some interactive efforts and even polls that are coming up. So just real briefly, I think most of you may know CARE. We're an international humanitarian and development organization that put women and girls at the heart of our work. I think that's really important when we're talking about rural development, as we have in sub-Saharan Africa, more than half of the smallholder farmers are women. Globally, women make up 40% of the workforce in agriculture. And we know if we're not incorporating women and women leaders in agriculture, aggregation, we're not going to have the same impact and inclusive growth that we want and need and through all of our missions. So I'd flag, as we talk about our CARE's approach to scaling, I referenced the case study that we worked with the community scaling, the scaling COP 2 years ago, but really excited to highlight that just a month ago, we've published another really strong guide on scaling what works, and it's hard. We have to recognize that this is not easy, or we would have already done it before, right? And if you can, you should be able to click over that link in this slide and go directly to this work and manual that we have that pulls out a lot of the good evidence that we've gathered through interrogating some of our programs over the years, and would really focus, and we'll talk about how the importance of working with local actors for scaling, which I think everyone on this call agrees with, but really putting that front and center in what we do. And then, to be real honest, not everything is going to scale on the private sector side, and that there's not a magic pot of money that is going to scale things unless we work really hard and are really intentional. And that last point, we design for scale from the start. So I want to get into one quick example, and then we'll dive into some social enterprise examples. But as this group is focused on rural development, I'd be remiss if I didn't flag the importance of communities saving for themselves. And CARE's very proud of the work we've done over 3 decades in working with communities on Village Savings and Loans Association, or VSLAs. There's more detail on what VSLAs are, including how members saved just last year, 2024, 1.8 billion in themselves, and how they can use that for rural development and poverty alleviation. But really importantly, when we're talking about scaling, for every savings groups that CARE has helped created, women have created another group. So that's just a thought when we put women and show something that is affordable and shows real benefit to communities, people will take it up and build it on their own. So for rural development, where most of our VSLAs are in rural areas, I think that's an important reminder to think about when we're thinking of good examples for scaling. So I'm going to move on to a social enterprise approach and model and financing that's also been, we think, very successful. And then I'll get into some other lessons learned that we can tear apart a little bit about some other ways we should be working. So biodigesters. This is a mostly agricultural-based crowd, but let me briefly tell what a biodigester is, and you'll excuse my enthusiasm for something called a biodigester and bioslurry, but these are real exciting interventions or tools for communities in the right context. So what's a biodigester? A biodigester takes manure and other biomass and turns it into cooking gas, and then also something called bioslurry. We may need a new name for it, but bioslurry, which is a fantastic fertilizer. So what is, with CARE Denmark and CARE Niger, and with great support from the Denmark government, we have been working with social enterprises in Niger and set up a system that makes sense for that context. So there's a lot of cattle in Niger. And working with our social enterprises and giving them this capital and support, we set up a lease-to-own system for biodigesters. So a farmer who normally could not afford the upfront costs of a biodigester, which is about $800, that's a lot of money for farmers that are making less than $2 a day. The farmer can lease to own a biodigester from the social enterprise. And since there's not a lot of cash and capital in some of these rural areas of Niger, they pay the social enterprise back in bioslurry. And the social enterprise then takes this bioslurry, this really strong, wonderful fertilizer, and then sells it because there's such a high demand for the fertilizer. So that model's allowed for some really great development and economic work and models to grow. So we've got social enterprises that are working on this. We've just had published last month of January, a peer-reviewed study that talked about what is the agricultural impact. So we have the how of the biodigesters and the financial markets system moving. And then I just draw your attention to the slide and some of the evidence and the agricultural impact. With millet, we've seen, thanks to this bioslurry that's such a strong fertilizer, over almost 287% increase in yields. And then there's some other different crops with yields input, but millet really took off. And then really important, and something we always like to look at CARE, is we've seen that women's time and girls' time is you spending less time collecting firewood. So we see multiple benefits. And so not only there's a financial benefit for communities and farmers to engage, we have the sort of development and social benefits that are coming along with this too. Now, there's some challenges to scaling in this, including a lot of these social enterprises don't have a lot of capital. So we're trying to partner and work with Kenyan venture capital and impact investors to be able to give more financing to these social enterprises so they can buy 50 biodigesters instead of just 5 or 6, for example, and really scale at a larger and better pace. Because there is, very importantly, that market demand for the type of fertilizer, and the farmers want the biodigesters. So that's some of the successes we've had on scaling around the social enterprise. So I'd like to move on. We can talk more about this when we get to questions and such, but we are about to put out a report on food loss and waste and scaling food loss and waste solutions. And it basically looks at why the heck have we not been able to scale some of these technologies around the world. Globally, we lose about 1/3 of food, or waste about 1/3 of food around the world. When we have over 700, 800 million hungry people, it makes very little sense on how our food systems are working, and figuring out how to cut that food loss and waste and help farmers increase their income, get more nutritional food to communities, and make that food more cheaper or accessible makes a lot of sense. And there's a lot of technologies and efforts to try to address these food loss and waste challenges. But we found that there's some pretty significant barriers to some scaling of these technologies that would love this community of practices help in addressing. But some of the more striking results we had of our study that we looked at, 20 plus programs, had dozens of interviews, both internally and externally, and found some good points, I think, that this community practice wouldn't debate so much, but want to focus on a little bit. Really importantly, some of the drivers of scale and what stopped things from scaling often were women's time, labor, and economic agency. Did the technology we're trying to support or scale, be it hermetically sealed bags, solar drying, biodigesters, or biochar even, is that taking women's time and labor into consideration? If it's adding time to a women's already overworked schedule, it's not going to scale. So no surprise, but really being intentional about how we look at women's labor and time is important. Again, another no surprise, but important to pull out, is the enterprise viability. Can you get your money back that you put into whatever technology? The biodigester example I just gave shows that yes, you can, if the market conditions are right, and you have, for example, enough manure to put into the biodigester and enough water and the demand side and pull. And through a variety of different programs that we looked at, if we're not looking at the market off-takers for any of the increased product that we would be producing through reducing food loss, it's a long sentence, but basically, if we produce more, people are going to buy it. or not even just produce, if we're going to be able to get that food to market, are people going to be able to buy it? And are there buyers and off takers for that product? And we've got many examples that show if we have our short term, if we only have a couple of years of programming and don't put the market first and do some of that market analysis first, the obvious answer is it's really hard to scale and keep things sustainable. And the accessibility of finance is really important. One of, again, looking back at the biodigester example, looking at the fact that our biodigester social enterprise needs more cash. We need to figure out how to get cash and financing so that they can scale at a bigger lens, not just buy enough materials to do 5 biodigesters, but actually 50, because the market's demanding 60 biodigesters, is something that we need to consider and think really closely about how we're working with microfinance institutions, with other banks, to make sure we're lining up all of that capital when it's needed. And I would flag a couple other kind of top takeaways of some of the things when we speak about systems and the partnerships. We have a large program in Nepal that looked at a lot of food loss and waste and nutrition programming that used cool bots that worked very well. There's cold storage facilities. But scaling was still constrained a lot by the upfront costs of those for small scale producers for refrigeration units. And how we subsidize our rural development and agricultural financing, we're often prioritizing production input over preventing or over loans for preventing loss reduction or post-harvest investments. So something that we look about, and as we try to crowd in more financing into agriculture, is to really think about what are we incentivizing? More yields that just leads to more food rotting on the side of the road, or how do we really make sure we're putting in the whole system for, be it from cold storage all the way to market, and making sure that we're able to sell at different marketplaces at the right time when the food is still edible. So I will stop there from some of these examples, but excited about moving into the longer conversations and questions, and would love to pass on to Esther, who's going to, I think, make some interactive space and conversation, and look forward to the conversation. Thank you so much to the Scaling of Practice community.
Thank you, Anne, for the great presentation. Really also for, I see a lot of thank yous from people. Also for the deep dive on really scaling challenges at programming level and highlighting some of the issues like market viability, women's time, and really the challenges there on scaling from a programmatic level. Now we shift gears a bit to see what other scaling challenges do we encounter at sectoral level while scaling, and sometimes hinder us from achieving the impacts that we'd want to see. So I'll invite Gabi to put the poll up, if possible. And we as a community are able to also present and tell us a little bit about the sectoral challenges that we come across when we are in our day-to-day work while scaling. So I invite you, if I think on your screen, you'll see the poll has popped up. So in 1 or 2 words, what are your organization's key scaling challenges that you feel you cannot address alone? Please feel free to fill in and submit, and the responses will come on the screen. I see a few responses coming up. So we have organizational silos, we have funding challenges, a lot of funding coming up. I see a few responses coming. Harmonized data issues, socio-political issues, stakeholder engagement, subsidies, right? I'm not sure about that. Impactful communication. Okay, so from Anne's case, she highlights really issues at programming level, but here would want to highlight some of the challenges we as organizations working on scaling usually come across at sectoral level that are beyond just one organization's purview. I see others are policy, a lot of policy. I think the winning are market financing policy, leadership misalignment, Oh, data sharing, I think that's a key one. So how do you do portfolio management across various organizations? I see investment programs. Please feel free to continue responding. I see a lot of responses. Okay, we have around more than 50% response rate. Keep it going. As we continue on this, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Michael Duar, who is an agricultural economist by training, and he has been working in development cooperation throughout his career. Before going back to Germany, he worked extensively in East Africa, and Michael currently leads SCALE, which is a German-funded ODA initiative providing support for scaling of agricultural innovation, and really based on the conviction that collaborative action is needed to achieve transformative sectoral impact. He engaged with other founding members to establish a scaling coalition. I think for many of us, today is the first time we are hearing about a scaling coalition, and I'm really keen to hear a little bit more about what is this scaling coalition and what is it trying to solve in this sector on scaling. So without further ado, Michael, please welcome.
Thank you, Esther, for the introduction. I'm delighted to present the Scaling Coalition on behalf of its current members. As Esther said, some of you might have heard of us. Probably many of you haven't really heard of us yet. We are still a relatively young initiative. And so I think it's good time to present ourselves. I think all of us can relate to some of the main challenges that we are facing when it comes to scaling. This by no means is a complete list, of course, but we believe that innovation and technologies exist and can unlock transformational change across food systems, but they remain isolated in many cases. Scaling challenges are oftentimes wicked problems which require action at sectoral or system level. So therefore, this all calls for collaboration. No single organization alone can solve these challenges, and there is limited space for active and problem-driven collaboration and coordination. This is some of the background which has set us off and set us in motion to contemplate about solutions, what led then further to the foundation of the Scaling Coalition. So the Scaling Coalition, in a nutshell, is addressing a problem which is to remove big bottlenecks that prevent those innovations from going to scale. The Scaling Coalition was founded or initiated in late 2024. In fact, it was the CGIAR Scaling Week in Nairobi, where some of us met and sort of thought about a new mechanism that would be required to address some of these issues. And then the Scaling Coalition was later on founded beginning of 2025. And so the members of the Scaling Coalition currently are CGIAR, FAO, the Gates Foundation, GIZ, and the World Bank. Now, big challenges need big teamwork. And so in line with that, we formulated a mission statement, which is to unite partners globally to address collective scaling challenges that no single organization can address alone. And that was sort of an insight or recognition that big as we may be as individual organizations, some of us, we believe that we need to join forces, join our resources and sort of come up with our comparative advantages, put them on the table, our strengths, and collectively work on a scaling ecosystem that is more conducive than what we have at the moment. So what the Scaling Coalition does, and this is just sort of a small overview, it builds a scaling ecosystem, a global one, which ensures that proven agricultural innovations reach those who need them faster, more efficiently, and more cost effectively. We want to co-create solutions to collective challenges that constrain scaling of innovations. We bring diverse partners together to transform fragmented scaling efforts and align them better in terms of scaling investments, frameworks, standards, knowledge, and tools, etc. And we provide a space to exchange, to learn, to collaborate, to design solutions that benefit the sector. The second part, we draw, and this is the proposal, and I'm coming in more detail to it at a later point in my presentation. We draw from the Scaling Community of Practice Agricultural Working Group, the members who share the coalition's values and are committed to provide active and in-kind contribution in the coalition's solution groups and other engagement. And also important, we want to keep operational structures as simple as possible. We do not run offices, we don't have a budget, we basically contribute from our organizational resources and pool these resources together to run the Scaling Coalition. So the Scaling Coalition, what it does not do is to solve specific innovation scaling problems of specific projects. So we create a framework, we create general solutions maybe, we want to build an ecosystem, but we are not providing advice on specific problems, scaling related problem. We are also not running a funding platform. We are not operating or funding scaling projects. And we are not providing an exclusive, closed or fixed community of practice or experts. We are open. We are coming to the membership model that we have come up with and that we want to propose. And you will see it's a very flexible and fluid kind of model. So when we first met in our first in-person meeting back at the beginning of 2025, we thought a little bit about a scaling ecosystem, and we said there are a number of various thematic areas which sort of constitute a scaling ecosystem and which pose sort of challenges and which need to be improved on or strengthened or worked on in order to come up with a comprehensive scaling ecosystem that really facilitates the scaling of innovations. So this is what we put together as a pie chart with the different slices and thematic areas. And as a next step, we looked at our organizations and tried to figure out where we would place ourselves, where we would see we would have comparative advantages, where we have strengths, where we have something to offer, where we have a strong mandate and could collaborate to sort of strengthen and improve those thematic areas that make up the scaling ecosystem. And with this, I'm handing over for the next poll question.
Which solution areas best align with the organization's challenges and expertise? We have several options: business models and investment packages, innovation profile and inventories. So this is listing out your innovations and having a database. Innovation acceleration. How do you get innovation taken forward? Scaling capacity sharing. There's a lot of people who would want to learn a little bit more about scaling. Advisory policy, network and partnerships. We have investment programming, advocacy and communication, portfolio management. How do you manage your list of innovations across several sectors, several organizations, institutional reform, scaling strategies, innovation bundles and packages? Let's see if we have some results coming up. So mainly we see most of the challenges are networks and partnerships. Science of scaling at 11%. Amazing. Scaling capacity sharing at around 11%. And innovation acceleration. A lot on acceleration and business model and investment packages. So a lot of partnership aspects raised across the board, followed by science of scaling. Institutional reform seems to not be such a big challenge across the boards, but I think the trend really is capacity sharing, networks and partnerships, and science and learning. Back to you, Michael.
Thank you. So what we have done is basically brought you into this circle, what we have done as the scaling coalition, and to locate your organization in areas here where you feel that you are sort of have a mandate, have an interest, have something to put on the table, because we want to bring you into the process and co-create with you certain solutions. Now, what we have started off with as a scaling coalition, just between us as the small group, is we have started off with 2 solution groups. We call them solution groups, not to confuse with the SCOP working group. And we have started working on 2 issues. One is data interoperability, and the other one is capacity sharing. You can also see that these thematic areas may have subtopics, split up into subtopics, which then will be addressed by solution groups. So we have these 2 solution groups in accordance with our organizational sort of strengths and mandates. CGIAR and FAO are working on solution group 1, interoperability, CGIAR, FAO, and GIZ working on the capacity sharing solution group. So to give you a little bit of a flavor what we are doing, so in the data interoperability solution group, for example, the problem that is being addressed is that innovations are sitting in many different organizational databases, and are not systematically consolidated into a federated system. So they are not really accessible, they don't speak to one another, and so that poses a problem, of course, for collaboration. So the solution is an interoperability framework that allows organizational innovation databases to speak to one another and to provide easier access to impact investors. What we have so far achieved in this solution group is that CGIAR and FAO have aligned their innovation databases against the needs of, in this case, the World Bank Group. The next step would be an inventory of other innovation databases out there and possibly alignment. So we are opening this up to other organizations to join in. So we have true data interoperability. The next or the second solution group is on capacity sharing. So the problem being addressed here is that scaling capacities across the ecosystem are insufficient. Capacity building measures are often not easily accessible to everyone. They sit with certain organizations. Capacity sharing efforts are fragmented in terms of their approach, formats, quality, and content. And so the solution would be by consolidating learning efforts into accessible support systems. We enable programs that are not impact-oriented and cost-effective, that are more impact-oriented and cost-effective, sorry. And what we have achieved so far, we have done a stock taking of capacity sharing offers among the scaling coalition members. And strengths and gap were identified. And what we want to do next is to develop a repository for easy access of the mapped scaling capacity formats. Decisions on what gaps to address will follow then. So the idea here is to open up. So each one of our 3 participating organizations here have certain scaling capacity sharing offers. but we don't know of one another. And so now we are putting this into a training calendar, which is accessible to the wider community. So these are just some examples for solution groups. So now I'm coming to the membership and engagement model. So I'm starting, and this is a proposal, and we want to discuss that further with you. I'm coming to that later. We are planning a webinar where we can discuss all of these issues together with you in more depth and intensity. But so this is a sort of first draft model that we have come up with. So I'm starting from the left-hand side. So this is the Scaling Community of Practice Agricultural Development Social Enterprises Working Group. And the gray dots are its members, which is you. And so this is the pool. And this is, so the pool would be crowdsourcing, scaling obstacles, problem areas to be addressed in the solution groups. The pool would be the source for the solution group membership and participants. It interacts with the advisory committee through the co-chair. The co-chair, the CGIAR co-chair, also is part of the advisory committee. So there is a very strong link. And it also receives, of course, the results of the solution groups. Now, next are these solution groups. In line with what I have presented to you, what we are already sort of piloting at the moment. And they provide space for active members to work on priority problem areas. They operate for a defined period of time with a clear objective and expected outputs. So there is a certain problem which will be addressed. The members of the solution group, the participants, will work together in the solution group once the solution has been prepared or the problem has been addressed. The outcome is there. The solution group will dissolve and another solution group might come up. So solution groups prepare outputs, which will then be disseminated to the broader community. The participation is voluntary and contribution-based. The members of a solution group should have a clear mandate and strong expertise, something to bring on the table to provide to the group in order to come up with a strong solution. Solution groups will nominate a focal point who will coordinate the solution group and interact with the advisory committee. We also said that we want to keep cycles of 6 to 12 months maybe, because solution groups would be open for new members to join. But in order to not disrupt too much, we said it would probably be a good idea to have a membership sort of fixed for 6 to 12 months in order to allow the solution group to come up, you know, with some intermediary solutions maybe before opening up for new membership. Then we have the advisory committee. So the advisory committee at the moment is composed of the initial founding members. This may evolve. We have already said, you know, we should probably have a representation from the global south, maybe also from the private sector. This is still in development. The advisory committee decides on priority areas and the solution groups. So the number of solution groups would be probably set to keep it at a manageable size. The number of members and composition of the solution groups, and also decides on proposals and work plans of solution groups and provides advice. It ensures that the dissemination of solution group outputs to the broader community is being done effectively, and decides also on limited financial resources. We have some financial needs for communication, websites, communication products, and so on. Advisory committee would represent the Scaling Coalition externally, and interfaces with the scaling community of practice leadership. Then we have the secretariat. At the moment, and this will probably stay like it for some time, is composed of appointed staff from the founding members. It provides a secretariat support to the advisory committee, also then to solution groups and to the comms group. And it's the point of contact, first point of contact for any external requests. We have the comms group, which develops currently a communication strategy. We want to set up a website, and we will guide us in producing communication products. Again, the composition of the comms group is appointed staff from the current founding members, may evolve as well. So what do we want to do next? We want to invite members, you, to the working of the working group to engage with the coalition in two-way flows of scaling ideas, discussions, and solutions. We want to invite you to actively join existing coalition solution groups by providing in-kind contributions, and to consider forming new coalition solution groups with other organizations, propose that, and then we form a new solution group to work on specific problems. We are, as I already have mentioned, planning and organizing for a webinar. The current title reads Unlocking System Change, Vision, Progress and Opportunities with the Scaling Coalition. It's scheduled for April 23rd of this year, starting at 8 a.m. And further information on this webinar will be provided. So this gives the opportunity for a deep dive. This is just what I just did, is maybe some sort of a teaser, you know, to raise your appetite for more. So then we will have a deep dive and go more into details what the Scaling Coalition is all about, how it interacts with the members of this scaling community of practice, and to co-create and sort of design, sort of the structure, the mechanisms of the Scaling Coalition together with you. And with this, I have reached the end of my presentation and give back to Esther or Anamika. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Really great presentation. Thank you for not only telling us about the coalition, but also how people can engage. And for now, I'd like to open the floor. I see several questions. We can probably take around 10 or so minutes. You're doing very well on time to respond to questions arising from Michael's presentation, and then we'll take questions arising from Anne's presentation. Johannes, I see you had a question. Please feel free to unmute and just ask it to Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Really interesting presentation, and I'm delighted that we can collaborate with the coalition. My question is on, the concept of country platforms, which is now very popular, especially in the climate space. You may have seen that at COP30, there was actually a country platform hub set up to basically coordinate the establishment and functioning of country platforms at country level in support of climate action. And the whole idea of country platforms is to coordinate actors, local as well as international actors on the ground in support of shared development of climate goals. Now, we've come across country platforms already in other sectors as we thought about scaling, especially in the health sector, where actually country platforms have been used quite intensively and supported by the Global Financing Facility for Every Woman, Every Child. So my question to you is this something, sort of the idea that at country level, in a way as a counterpart to your effort at the global level, there's a need to form institutional structures to coordinate action, and of course, from our perspective, in support of transformational scaling. So that is my question. Is that something that has come up in your consideration of areas that you might want to consider? We are under the Scaling campaign, very likely going to focus on this as a general issue, possibly specifically also in the climate area. But if in agricultural development and social enterprises, country platforms for coordinated action at the local level, country level, might be worth exploring, I'd be just interested in learning more about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yes, you're right. Might be worth exploring. I think at this point in time, it's not on our priority list. We want to sort of get going with this scaling coalition at this level now, at the global level, and interacting with the scaling community of practice at the moment. I want to refer also, you're probably familiar with the fact that CGIAR has set up a scaling hub in Nairobi, a regional scaling hub, and 2 virtual hubs, one in Asia, in Nepal, in Asia, and one in South America. And so that is maybe also another step, an intermediary step in a way, to set up regional hubs before moving to country hubs, because, I mean, depending on how you want to run those hubs, but that may involve some, financial resources and lots of organizational work and structures and the like. So it also comes with sort of some requirements and burden. So we as the Scaling Coalition, I think, are at the moment focused on the global level, CGIAR, and I want to hand over, happy to get some input from my friends from CGIAR. We have the regional scaling hub and then country hubs. I think for us at the moment are maybe not a immediate priority, but definitely eventually makes a lot of sense.
Thanks. Great.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone from CGIAR who wants to add on this? Okay. If not, I see we have another question from Todd. Todd, do you want to unmute?
So, Michael, thanks for that information. And as you know, we've been talking about this a bit with you guys, but thought for the broader audience, maybe a little bit more clarity if you guys have thought this through. 3 points I raised. Who is intended to identify the problems that the Scaling Coalition would address? And what does that look like? Second, will the solution groups be created or pulled from only the community of practice, or are they going to be advertised and pulled from other sources as well? And third, will the organizations have to apply, in a sense, to become part of these solution groups, which I know will arise and then dissipate once those issues have been addressed? Thank you.
Thank you. I think the problems, who identifies the problems, I mean, this is sort of something that what we call the pool or the membership of the Scaling Community of Practice Agriculture chapter would be asked to do, wherever you feel, as members, this is an imminent problem, this is a priority, this is really a huge pain point that would make a great difference if we would have a solution for this, then this can be referred to the advisory committee and we would sort of reflect on it, we would discuss it, and then get back to you, to the group that has initiated these ideas. The solution groups, at the moment, our idea is that the solution groups are formed by the members of the Scaling Community of Practice. So whenever there is a organization that is not the member of Scaling Community of Practice, we would encourage this organization to become a member, because obviously you are interested in the topic of scaling, innovation scaling. So become a member of the Scaling Community of Practice, work with the other members, identify problems and propose a solution group that then, would be reflected upon by the advisory committee and then eventually, put into operation and then sort of work on these solutions.
So we have other comments. So Millicent says, great global coalition. It would be great to tap on AFDB based on their work of supporting scaling technologies for African agricultural transformation. So this is the third program. Maybe I'll read out another one. The other one is great to hear about the coalition. What are the ways scaling impact are made future ready? Probably we can take this too.
Well, I think by sort of working on these problems that we have identified that sort of constrain scaling, that will create solutions. These solutions will be made available to the members of the scaling community of practice, of course, and the wider community. So there, I think we also interact, of course, with other organizations, to make this available globally to the wider community, to then use those solutions, whether it's methods, whether it's tools, approaches, whatever it may be, to use it in their daily work. So we hope, with that to build sort of an open source repository of solutions that are accessible by various organizations inside and outside the scaling community of practice.
Thank you. Checking in to see if any other, I see Millicent follows up to say, as mentioned, there are other existing scaling platform. What would be the value add for a global coalition? The follow-up.
Mm-hmm. I think each platform maybe has their own sort of mandate and strengths and sort of focus, and we just identified, that there are lots of gaps and lots of unresolved challenges when it comes to innovation scaling. And we felt, that it needed a new initiative or a new mechanism, that is closely sort of interrelated with the scaling community of practice to coordinate what maybe otherwise single organizations are trying to achieve, but now to join in a collaborative way and coordinate this. And this coordination mechanism that I try to explain, with the membership and engagement model, I think is something that can sort of boost the outputs in terms of solving problems related to scaling of innovations.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I see we have a few more minutes before we transition to questions from the first presenter. I see one from Victor.
It was just a comment, and it's just one of those, there's always so many projects running in silos, and there's no incentivization, and there's also no little capacity to better connect projects where, for example, the biodigester that was talked about, you could link that to soil improvement or even to a rural development program. Yeah, so those things are just hardly ever happening. It's not structured, so it's just a comment. It's not really a question.
Okay, thank you. I'll give a chance for anyone else with any question, maybe they can raise their hand and we can respond to it.
Or any additions from my friends from the Scaling Coalition. I think some of you are in the call as well. If there is anything you want to add, then please feel free.
Okay, I see Sean.
Great. Hello there. I'm Sean Fury from SCEP Foundation and the Rural Water Supply Network. Just a comment that I think this is a really, really great initiative, but I would, from the rural water supply side of things, I'd love to collaborate more with the folks in agriculture. And that links to the previous point about around the incentives for collaboration, because us folks in SDG 6 kind of get a bit stuck in our little wash bubble, and I think in the modern environment we need to collaborate with colleagues in other sectors, particularly when we're talking about the same people. It's just like the farmers also need safe drinking water, and those that are in rural areas also need jobs and employment. So I'd love to see how we can bring some of those scaling things together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we want to provide that opportunity, that platform. I don't know whether you are a member of the Scaling Community of Practice, Agricultural Development and Social Enterprises working group. If you are, you are most welcome to participate in solution groups. Whether you have a rural water supply background or a purely agricultural background, I think doesn't matter, because oftentimes, depending on the subject or the topic, these scaling challenges are somewhat sector agnostic also. So I mean, you're most welcome to participate. I think we should go and look beyond immediate, sectoral boundaries in this respect.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I see one more from Dakmawi.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is, since this space for innovation and scaling is highly, highly a multi-stakeholder environment with multiple actors with different visions for the future and maybe different approaches to scaling and different pathways. I'm wondering if such pluralism, sometimes can be difficult in developing solutions or strategies or overall in the collaboration process. And if you have any experiences on that, and yeah, that's the idea of the question. Thank you.
Yeah. It's a good question. I think we deliberately want to look into the diversity of the composition of solution groups. So to have sort of multiple sort of organizations from different backgrounds with different mandates and so on, because that enriches the discussion within the solution groups. So yes, the pluralism, diversity of members of solution groups is absolutely sort of welcome, and I think will produce better results. So it's a very important point, but I think we are very aware of the need for that plurality.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dakmawi, and thank you, Mark, for that response. I see Mark wants to respond to Mark's question. So Mark and Mark.
Yeah, Mark, responding to Mark. Thanks so much, Mark, for the question on interoperability. What would be an expected outcome of such a solution group? I think Michael explained that many organizations are keeping track of their innovations along impact pathway, but there's little more centralized or federated systems that allow organizations to exchange. Or to know, like, okay, what is CGIAR doing, what is GIZ doing, what is the World Bank Group doing, etc., etc. So I think one of the ideas is to develop a what we call a Rosetta Stone that allows these kinds of platforms, or at least of organizations that are interested in exchanging, to speak to one another. And you could imagine that would result either in a public platform where people have access to, let's say, more than one organizational innovation database, or the Scaling Coalition members can solve like specific problems between one another when it comes to interoperability. So I think like we are aiming to make solutions available to the broad community. That is definitely in the DNA of the scaling community, but also by solving problems bilaterally. So I hope that answers your question, and looking forward to working with you on that.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you also, for providing further information on this. Just checking if we have any other comments, any other inputs on the Scaling Coalition. If not, I'd like us to shift back to the first presentation. Okay, many thanks, Michael. Thank you very much. So I see, thank you for Tanya, for Aaron's presentation. I see a question from Tanya. So the question to you, Anne, is do you have any financing mechanism planned to allow for the maintenance of this technology, i.e. the biodigesters, in case of damage, especially mechanical damage that could be caused by handling or activities on the farm or house?
No, great question. And I think part of the scaling needs of this are making sure that there are local masons and mechanics who can take care of the biodigesters. So that's actually part of some of the support that needed to start at the beginning of the project, is to build the local capacity. So now you have your standalone social enterprises being able to sell the biodigesters, and a growing cadre of often more young masons and folks who the farmer can then ask to help with fixing the biodigester. So you kind of help scale that local economy in that way too. But yeah, you do need training on the biodigesters to make sure there's enough water and that there's no problems with it, or can get pretty messy. So building that in from the start and learning from when that doesn't happen has, I think, been an important part. But yeah, same like all of these projects, is you need the operations and expenses and the maintenance to keep things going. But I think with a focus on the private sector side, it behooves the private sector actors to make sure that these things go, because then that keeps up the demand and other farmers see that this is a benefit, and it scales the private sector interest and the farmer's interest in keeping it going. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Yeah, really nice to hear that. I wonder if this service is readily available to people, and do the social enterprises also make sufficient margins, or do you have to also fund them a bit? But also welcoming any other person with a question to raise your hand in the meantime, and we'll let you unmute yourself and ask the question. Yeah.
There we go. I put earlier into the chat a reference to a case study that we did on scaling biomass project in Moldova, and we in that analysis, we came across the fact that for scaling up of the biomass solution that UNDP actually supported to national scale, one of the key limits was the competitive pricing, or uncompetitive pricing for that matter, of natural gas. Now, the same could be a problem for other products such as fertilizer. Is that something you've run into, and is that something you explicitly considered in your project and program as a factor that needs to be analyzed and considered as in terms of policy environment? Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. And I was just in Laos, and we were thinking about how do we leverage biodigesters in something we're working on and trying to replicate this model. And the cooking preferences of people is different, and there's readily available firewood. So it doesn't work in all contexts unless we solve for that problem or bring a price point down so low. So the market analysis on all of this is really key. And I think going in with the private sector lens of this project is the only way that it's not even it's a business. Like how do we do that, but for the development, the gains? And someone put in the chat something about the soil amendment. You know what? That's a great added benefit. But for the social enterprises, it's how do we keep more farmers buying this? It's an added benefit to have that soil benefit. But that if we count that, does that help scale? We just know the millet is growing more and that farmers are benefiting more. So there's sort of like, what evidence do you need to keep the private sector side of it flowing, and the demand flowing from the farmers for something? And then really importantly, I think this gets to a bit to your question. The capital is so important. So we've so one of the subjects of the webinar we're talking about is the partnerships that are needed. We need the right type of capital to be able to help scale these ventures in a way that makes sense. And I think that's where some of the roles of the INGO and donors still can, how do we de-risk capital and get it in so that these enterprises can scale faster when they have the right business plan. And Johannes, to your point, when they've said, we've tested the market and oh my gosh, more people want this biodigester, because at the current repayment rate, if you can only produce 5 to 6 biodigesters, but if you give an extra $40,000, you can scale 50 or however many biodigesters. You can go a lot faster and bigger. So getting that capital right matters a lot at the right time, and not pushing without the demand coming also from the farmers. And then also, to the good point earlier, is making sure these things are continuing to work and farmers are seeing that replication happen, and the benefits accruing to their neighbors. But the context matters. Like it comes off as a silver bullet, but you cannot you have to know your land how many cows, where the cows are, where the manure goes and all these things, so it has to be the right addition. And Niger has a lot of cattle. So it works very well there. And there's a lot of other places that have a lot of cattle. We've done something similar in Uganda. If I could just do really, even in schools, because schools in Uganda will have cattle and milking cows. So we've done with Novo Nordisk biodigester programs in Uganda, but that's the private sector model is not going to work perfectly there. But in other parts of Uganda, but also with refugees, we've done something similar with farmers cooperatives too, to be able to scale this, because you have the right resources going into manure as a resource, can be a resource going into these enterprises and that are on the land.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you, Anne. We see a question from Mark. To what extent has CARE gotten into the business of startups versus working with existing enterprises, and how might they have differed in success rates?
Yeah.
Yep.
Great to hear from Mark. Hi, Mark. I wish you could come off mute. But good question. And I think it's a mixed bag. We have 30 million, mostly women in village savings and loans associations around the world. So they're saving for themselves. But my goodness, not every one of them is an entrepreneur. I'm certainly not an entrepreneur, but 1 in 10 maybe of those women has a really good idea and wants to scale something. And then we can help support them along the way. So that might be a lot more handholding than we would do. But there's a lot of existing enterprises that need TA, technical assistance down at that level. And so we've been doing a lot of that work, including in more green businesses, to help scale up. So I think it's a mixed bag, and it depends on the situation and the entrepreneur. We have a portfolio of social enterprises that we work with, but there's a lot of really cool innovation that's happening on the ground that we work with and try to support. So not a great answer, Mark, because I don't think that there's one size fits all for this, just because the needs are very different. One plug I would put, though, is I still see a gap in a lot of the financing needs that's from like the 5 to 30K. When we go to the real last mile, or we call it first mile, of people in more poverty, rural areas, we're talking about rural development, getting that financing to those levels is very challenging. And so one of the things that we're looking at is changing the ecosystem and working more with microfinance institutions and encouraging, incentivizing the right type of lending to make sure that women are having access to those same loans, and transitioning, if you're in a village savings and loans association, how do you get into formal banking? Because then that opens up the capital for you to be able to scale. So we need that systems approach when we talk about scaling to really be able to have the wide impact that we want. Because enterprise by enterprise is pretty hard. It's expensive to do from a support function, but changing that whole ecosystem, especially with the good microfinance institutions, is one way to tackle the problem at a broader scale.
Thank you, Anne. And I think this is a really nice place to put a comma on it. So we need the systems approach, and we hear from the coalition, we need this coalition of many organizations to figure out what are the sectoral issues that we need to deal with while scaling, but also bringing in a practical approach on how to unlock some of those challenges. I would like to stop here. Thank you very much, Anne. Thank you very much, Michael. Great presentations, and also thank you from all the other presenters. I'll hand over now to my colleague Annemaika for one last activity and then a closing session. Thank you and welcome, Annemaika.
So the last activity is that we would now invite you to participate in a short interactive activity, and we call it the Plural Pathways to Scaling. And we discussed a lot about scaling, so I'm sure you will have a lot to share also. So in the chat box, please respond to the prompt. What is one shift your organization could make to enable scaling? Esther and Gabby, one shift is there. Yeah. So one shift that your organization could make to enable scaling. You can share 2 points also. One may be reflecting change in approach and partnership financing, or strategy that you think could help make scaling more effective and feasible. So yeah, over to you. Please start. Okay, market-driven, demand-driven, innovation, creation. result-based contracting. Okay, greater emphasis on partnership, doubling down on country ownership. Any more? Joint action, definitely, yes. Any more options? Any more response? More systematic management on our innovation portfolio, committing to adaptive management for sure. Demand-driven, stronger emphasis on system strengthening activities and support. Better understanding on essential principles to embed for transformational scaling, participatory and collaborative approaches at different levels, systematic evaluation, and finally expanding knowledge and evidence of different models into actions for all stakeholders. I mean, these we are kind of collecting these because we believe that this will help us surface, various perspectives from the community, and will also help us in, designing our future pathways and strengthen our forum as well. So if there is any more, please share. Incentives and resources for frontline staff to focus on scaling. That's a very important suggestion, I would say, because we often forget the real foot warrior of the scaling practices. Considering scaling early on, yes, definitely. And it's very difficult to kind of assess when is the right time, and we are sometimes late. So it's a very good idea to think about scaling at a very early stage, and evidence generation. Definitely, you need evidence for the scaling. Focus should be there, definitely. Embrace the new digital tools to enhance reach with beneficiaries. Yes, there are apps. I mean, yeah. Okay, any of you, Esther, Johannes, Michael, any would like to briefly talk about it, whatever the responses has emerged, or shall we kind of move to the next day?
Thank you all for a really wonderful session today. Thank you for organizing it. Thank you to the participants for their active participation. And I think we're on a great trajectory with our new chairs, co-chairs. So also, Michael, I think it's great that we have this budding cooperation with the coalition, which, as I noted in my intervention in the text in the chat, is really very important from a scaling perspective. We believe a very important part of the story, that the funders just have to come together and work much more closely to hand off from each other, to collaborate, hand off as appropriate along the scaling pathway. So thank you very much, all of you. And please join us tomorrow at our final session, because that's kind of a key opportunity to look forward for the scaling community as a whole. Thank you very much, and all the best.
Thank you so much, Johannes. Thank you so much, Esther. And I would like to sincerely thank all our participants today who joined. Your presence, your insight, reflection, everything made this discussion very meaningful. Heartfelt thanks to our two speakers for sharing their valuable experiences. And I remember you shared in the beginning that, excuse my enthusiasm, and I was like, my God, this is such a powerful experience. So thank you so much for, sharing that infectious enthusiasm with us, because your models are really promising and powerful. And you would, like, be it VSLA or be it biodigesters, it's kind of directly hitting to the core of the problems, very nuanced. For instance, you're talking about time poverty for women and how we know that how it is affecting their economic participation. And here you have a model which is kind of, in a very pragmatic and promising way, it's helping women. So thank you so much. Thanks a ton, Michael, for sharing about the Scaling Coalition and for giving us a very clear sense of the work being done to advance the scaling efforts. And we actually especially appreciate the way you highlighted some of the most daunting and often overlooked challenges. We do not realize it, but these are there, and these obstruct scaling innovation in the real and practical world. And most importantly, I think you kind of showed us the promise in the coalition for giving us a clear picture on how one could contribute to the scaling coalition meaningfully. And that was very pragmatic and extremely helpful. So thanks a ton. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to my colleagues at Scaling Community of Practices, all of you, especially Gabby Montalvo, Dr. Johannes Lind, Dr. Esther Quijero, and Dr. Mukai. Mukai couldn't join us, but she played a very critical role in envisioning, conceptualizing, and designing this webinar. Gabby, many thanks for your support in organizing, for your patience and everything. This event went really very smoothly, and we are deeply thankful. I don't know how to thank Johannes, but still I want to thank you for founding this forum and your passionate and continued involvement in making this space a very vibrant and promising space. And special thanks for briefing us today about the fascinating journey of SEOP and this webinar as well. And also for reiterating the significance of scaling in development sector and more specifically in the field of agriculture and rural development. I'm short of word when I think of thanking my two colleagues with whom I'm working very closely, Esther and Mukai. They had been the ones who conceptualized and designed this webinar and have been tirelessly working to make the Working Group on Agriculture, Rural Development and Social Enterprises a very promising and enabling space. And finally, thank you all of you who participated in the discussion and shared your thoughts and meaningful contributions and made the conversation very live. We really look forward to continue this dialogue in future. And as you know, that next webinar is scheduled on 23rd of April. So please stay connected and, for more information about our upcoming event. And we really look forward to see you again very soon in our next webinar and our other events. Thanks again. And with this, I formally conclude this webinar.